Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It always worries me that faceless voice making the announcements is known as the voice of God. And in this case, as a journalist, I can give you breaking news that that voice is half Iranian, half Mexican. I don't know what image that puts into your head, but he's a wonderful fellow with the IFPMA by the name of Ali Karami Ruiz. So thank you, Ali. You'll hear from him coming up throughout the day. Anyway, I just want to first ask you if you could switch off your mobile phones or switch them to silent so we have an uninterrupted session coming up in just a moment. Just keep an eye on the phones and make sure we don't have those going off. As Ali had said and as Eduardo mentioned, I'm Riz Khan, I'm a journalist, and I'm very honored to be your moderator for the Assembly today. It's good to see that many of you who face the challenge of Hurricane Sandy still managed to get over here, such as myself coming in from Washington, D.C. I know a lot of you, like me, spend time flying much of the time. And, you know, in the interest of accountability, I heard that one of the American airlines had set up a rule that said that from now on, if there's a bad landing, it's not the crew that has to take all the abuse from the passengers, but the pilot. So they set a rule that the pilot had to stand at the door of the cockpit after any bad landing and take any of the comments from the passengers. So after one particularly bad landing, the pilot stood there at the door of the cockpit and everyone was getting off a bit shaken up. And the very last person getting off was an elderly lady. And she finally stopped and said, "Young man, can I ask you a question?" And the pilot said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Did we land or were we shot down?" So I'm glad you're all here safe anyway. As I said, I'm a TV journalist by profession, but can claim some relevance to this gathering in that I trained in medical physiology. Essentially, I'm a failed doctor. I managed to end up in journalism and spent my time doing TV news. But I studied, to some degree, what medicines do to the body, as I did clinical pharmacology as part of my course. And one thing that I realized is that as we're here to talk about innovating together for global health, it's a very important topic in a world that's rapidly growing in population and increasingly interconnected and interdependent. So getting old is difficult. I know this. I just celebrated, if that's the right word for it, my half-century this year. And I know that 50 isn't old, but it also made me realize that there's a greater dependence and importance when it comes to medicines and what they do to the body. It can be rather challenging, though, getting old. And I heard about an elderly gentleman who went for his annual checkup to his doctor. And the next day, the doctor saw him walking down the street, dressed up in very fancy clothes, with a very young woman on his arm, big smile on his face, walking along. So the doctor was like, what is he doing? A few days passed and he bumped into the gentleman again. He said, "Jack, I saw you the other day dressed up like I don't know what, and you had this very young woman on your arm, and she's going to be your granddaughter. What are you doing?" He said, "I'm just following your advice, doctor." He said, "What do you mean following my advice?" He said, "You told me at the checkup, be cheerful, get a hot mama." He said, "No, Jack, I said, be careful, you've got a heart murmur." So I'm hoping the hearing in this room will be a little more accurate as we get going today. It's something I want to point out to you right now, by the way. It's not just about listening and listening accurately. It's about actually participating, and this gathering is very much for you. So please do take part with your questions and comments. It's very much about getting your input to what's happening today as well. So I'll be looking out for those questions and comments throughout the day. We've done largely away with speeches and presentations, and we're going very much for a Q&A format. So with that, I want to kick off for the first panel, which is entitled Innovation Today, Treading New Ground to Meet Global Health Needs. And as I say, it's a very interconnected world where the population growth and geographic and demographic profile of the world is changing, presenting new challenges for both the public and private sectors. And public-private collaboration is never really an easy marriage, as you can imagine. I bumped in New York at the UN, I bumped into Archbishop Desmond Tutu recently in an elevator, and he'd been a guest on my show a few times. And I reminded him of an interview I heard he had done where he was asked about 50 years of marriage. He'd been married 50 years. And the journalist said, "Archbishop Tutu, in those 50 years, have you ever considered divorce?" He said, "Divorce? Never. But murder?" So no collaboration or partnership is easy. Hopefully we'll find some common ground today.